You're watching Planet Earth, Our Loving Home on Supreme Master Television. On today's show, Professor Barry Brook from the University of Adelaide, Australia, explains the role livestock raising plays on climate change.
I'd like to talk to you, Barry, about the review that you did with Jeff Russell it's called Meat's Carbon Footprint. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was a study we did which looked at the relative impact of eating beef on a family's CO2 emissions compared to some of their other activities that most people might suspect would have a much greater contribution to global warming. So the example we used was, let's say you had a large four-wheel drive vehicle, a Ford Territory, so that cost about 17 tonnes of CO2 emissions to build the thing, and then to run it each week it might be about 200 grams of CO2 per kilometre driven. Something like that. So you can make the calculation on that basis. It might be 60 kilograms of CO2 a week that you're using to drive this lumbering Ford Territory around, as well as the emissions that went into producing it. If you eat what the CSIRO Total Wellbeing Diet recommends is the average weekly consumption of beef, which is somewhere between 3 to 5 kilograms, then you find that when you do the calculations for methane, even when it's using the standard, which is 25 times as powerful as CO2, and remember earlier I said really we should be talking about 72 times as powerful, but even at 25 times as powerful, that would be releasing about 200 kilograms a week compared to 60 from your Ford Territory. So you only need to go for about 5 years cutting out that meat of your diet, and you paid for the emissions of that great four-wheel drive. So that's one example. Another way to look at it is the amount of emissions produced by a kilogram of steak. That's so emissions intensive in terms of methane that it's the equivalent to 4 times the emissions that would be released by producing a kilogram of aluminium, which is considered incredibly energy intensive and using a lot of electricity to actually produce that aluminium by electrolysis. So beef 4 times more than producing a kilogram of aluminium, beef being much more of a contributor than driving a four-wheel drive vehicle. These are facts which are greatly underappreciated. So it means you need to be climate conscious about your diet, because there are some impacts in your lifestyle that will have a much greater effect on global warming than others, and people don't actually understand what they are.
And in relation to water that they use to grow beef, there's a lot of water used in that regard. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, indeed. There's a lot of water goes into producing a kilogram of beef, and a lot of water also goes into producing dairy products. So much dairy in Australia is conducted on lands that wouldn't actually be suitable for dairy except for irrigated agriculture. So this is water that's piped from the Murray and sprayed over vast areas of pasture to produce sufficiently green pasture to produce good milk. But that's the same water that's in desperate short supply in Adelaide. It's killing the Coorong, for instance, because it's not getting enough water flow. These are being sprayed onto the green fields of Western Victoria to produce dairy. It's not actually a very sensible use of water at all. So I think people have to look at the total impact of livestock to really appreciate why they can be particularly damaging to global change. And indeed, looking further afield than Australia to the tropics, one of the major drivers of tropical deforestation, which in itself is responsible for about 20% or a fifth of all of human CO2 emissions, is driven by clearance of tropical forests for cattle grazing. So again, it's a driver of deforestation, causes CO2 emissions directly by chopping down and burning, mostly burning those trees, and then once the cattle are there, producing a whole lot more methane as well. So there's no doubt that livestock have a long shadow, and indeed that was the title of a report produced by the United Nations last year, looking at the total impact of livestock on global change. It's pretty profound and it's pretty pervasive.
Do you think that our government should be doing more as regards to letting people know about how they can act as individuals to help with our planetary crisis?
I think leaving agriculture out of the equation sends the wrong signal, because it exempts a sector of society from making greenhouse gas cuts when in fact every sector of society needs to contribute, so it's just moving the burden to other parts of society. And it's not rightfully acknowledging the impact the environmental impact that ruminant animals have on Australia. People often talk about climate change as having a long-term impact and what it's going to do by the end of the century. And yet we're observing impacts such as the loss of Arctic summer sea ice, an expansion of tropical weather systems, very intense droughts in sub-Saharan Africa and indeed in Australia. The sort of impacts we predicted for 20, 30, 50, 100 years off are occurring now. And there's also a great risk that we're going to cross what are known as tipping points in the Earth system, where we start to get runaway climate change, or at least climate change that's greatly accelerated by changes to the Earth system. We're at a crucial social tipping point and a crucial environmental tipping point right now. Now is the time to take action. It's urgent.
We thank Professor Brook for his important research and work to help restore our planet's ecosystem. Caring viewers, it was a pleasure to have you join us for today's Planet Earth, Our Loving Home. Our show airs every Wednesday on Supreme Master Television. Up next, stay tuned for enlightening entertainment right after noteworthy news. We wish you a blessed life filled with divine love and inner peace.